My dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin. But if anybody does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. He is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only for ours, but also for the sins of the whole world. We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Dear friends, I am not writing you a new command, but an old one, which you have had since the beginning. This old command is the message you have heard, yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded them.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another night of YF. Tonight we're going to be looking at 1 John 2 and thank you to Katie for reading the passage for us. We're going to be looking at sin as a reality, persistent sin as a problem, and the blood of Christ as the solution. Last week in our huddles we looked at 1 John 1, where in verse 8 it's made clear that sin is a fact in the life of a Christian. We are all sinners by nature. Verse 9 makes it clear, however, that there is always forgiveness for confessed sin. Yet John wants it also to be clear that as Christians, we should be concerned about sin. This is not something that we should take lightly. If sin is inevitable for us, it is not because God has dictated that we must sin. Last week we looked at verse 8, which states, if we claim to have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. When we sin, we may think we're the only ones who struggle with something. We may look to other people and think that they do that so much better or they do not make as many mistakes as we do. But this verse is a reminder that we all struggle, so do not be discouraged. However, at the same time, John also wants to make it clear that we do not have to sin, for God's desire is that we do not sin. Although sin is a reality, we should never give up and think that there's no point in trying to honour God. In the passage, John tells us, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Notice how John says that we know we are truly saved by our desire to keep the commands of God. In other words, our attitude towards sin is a good indicator of our relationship with God or where we are at with him. Recently on the YF weekend, we talked about how we have two natures within us, the flesh and the spirit. The flesh is our old sinful nature, but we also have the Spirit of God within us who empowers us to honour God. In Galatians 5, Paul challenges us to walk by the Spirit and not by the flesh. Also, in Romans 8, we are told to put sin to death, and that should be our attitude towards sin. When I was preparing for tonight, this became a challenge for me. Is this truly my attitude? And I want to encourage you to take a minute to examine your own life, and what is your attitude towards sin? I want you firstly to recognise the seriousness of it, and secondly, to take time to pray about it. Psalm 139 says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. I want to encourage you tonight to pray those verses. Persistent sin is a problem because it can break our fellowship with God. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. The reason Christ came into the world and suffered was to destroy sin. Paul tells us in Ephesians that Christ died to purify for himself a bride. He gave himself for us to redeem us from all iniquity. Whenever we sin, we are insulting the suffering of Christ. John tells us that he who commits sin is of the devil, suggesting that we have the nature of Satan within us rather than the nature of God. Sin may jeopardise our assurance of salvation. Verses 3 to 4 say, "And by this we may be sure that we know him, if we keep his commandments. He who says, 'I know him,' but disobeys his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. For persistence in sin destroys our assurance of salvation." Sin is a reality for all of us, and yet we are called to put sin to death because as followers of Jesus, we are called to be holy. If we were to stop here, we would be left in a very difficult and a very hopeless place. But thankfully, John does not stop here. "My dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin." God's desire is that you may not sin. John believes that his letter can help the people. Therefore, if it can help them, it can help us. John then adds, "But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father." In other words, do not despair when you sin, as there is hope. There is provision made. We have an advocate. An advocate is a person who puts a case on someone else's behalf. We have someone fighting on our side, and our advocate is Jesus Christ. We may think that our sin sets God against us, but God's love is so great that in his love, he paid the ultimate price for us to be able to stand in the face of his holy righteousness. Through Jesus, God can be for us, even whilst we are still sinners. Our advocate admits our guilt, entering his plea on our behalf as the one who has made an atoning sacrifice for our sinful guilt. Jesus is our defender, and God is not shocked by our human behaviours. He knew before he saved us that we would make mistakes and that we would mess up. However, the encouragement is that no mistake is too big to cause God to change his mind about saving us. In him, our salvation is secure, and his forgiveness is always readily available to us. And he himself is the atoning sacrifice for our sins. This means that Jesus is the one who atones for and takes away our sins. However, not only our sins, but the sins of the world. Sin need no longer be a barrier between God and man. Our weakness comes in our flesh, which is not consistently willing to rely on Jesus for every victory over sin. God has promised that one day the flesh will be perfected through the resurrection. There is a song that we sometimes sing which talks about heaven as a place where we will love God with an unwinding heart. And what an incredible thought that is. Sin affects our lives so much that it's hard to imagine having a heart that does not sin. Yet God has promised to remove sin completely from the world and from our hearts. In the meantime, however, the challenge from these words in 1 John is to go to war with sin, seeking to put it to death in every area of our lives as we rely on his strength and on his grace to pick us up when we fall down. We're going to play a wee video of a song, and I just want to encourage you now to put away any distractions and really just listen to and reflect on the words of the song. And I just want to encourage you to pray what we've talked about tonight. Pray Psalm 139 as we listen to this song.
This fear and unbelief is not the Father put to grief, his spotless Son for us. And will the righteous judge of men condemn me for that debt of sin, now cancelled at the cross? Don't feel your banishment from God, since Jesus set you free. Jesus